thank you, Gunjan, for joining us. It's an honor to host you, and we look forward to interacting with you. So I'll start by introducing Gunjan. Gunjan is CEO of the company Only Much Louder, and she started working really early at the age of 16, and she's worked with a number of global and Indian ad agencies, including Anand Worldwide in Boston, Chlorophyll in India, Ogilvy and Mather. So anything you name in brand building, and she has been a part of it. She's been, sculpting the brand solutions, and she launched her own company in 2009, Design for Information. She was the founder of Design of Information, which won several coveted awards globally. She has been part of OML since 2014, and she has been instrumental in helping the company transform itself from a homegrown Indian company to a global company, setting up one of its fastest growing verticals, the Global Creator Network, which has presence in over 22 countries. She has also been a key member of the live events team, from the design of very first Bacardi NH7 Weekender Festival and then bringing it online during the pandemic. Uh, Gunjan, you started off really early at the age of 16. So what motivated you to start at such an early age? And, it's in India, starting at the age of 16 when kids are just going to school, and you started off at that particular age. What motivated you, and what were the challenges that you faced at that point of time? And what was the thought process that was going through your mind?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. Now that you ask me like this, I'm probably wondering the same question, thinking, hey, what was I thinking about trying to get started working so early? Because we have the rest of our lives ahead of us to work, right? So now, of course, like now when I look back, I'm thinking, hey, was it better spent hanging out with, college friends, etc. But I think the one thing that maybe enabled me to start early, and now we're seeing that more and more with a lot of younger students around us as well, is that the entry barriers are far lower. If you're a smart kid with a laptop today, you could be building the next crypto exchange, because that's literally all it takes.
Right.
So I'm almost fortunate that I got the opportunity to. It was, in fact, I don't even think there was a legal allowance for somebody at the age of 16 to work. I remember standing outside the Ogilvy Interactive office for 2 weeks straight, literally hounding them into giving me a job. I was like, hey, I'll do anything. I know how to, I know Photoshop and I know Illustrator. I'm sure you need those skills here. Whatever you want me to do, I'll take it. And they had no way to compensate me because it's illegal to employ kids below 18. So they came up with a clause where they'd give me a stipend for the year that I spent with them. But yeah, I think I'm only fortunate to have started off that early because it really allowed me to see the various aspects of being part of different brand businesses. And then, yeah, just, making the most of all those learnings.
Great. So, when you started working that early, so did people see you as that little kid who walks down into the office? And how did the people treat you when, what were the challenges that you faced at that point of time? Did it give you some opportunities, or were it only challenges at that point of time?
Honestly, I wouldn't say there were challenges. I was welcome in every room, but I was welcomed as that little kid. That, hey, here's the kid in the office who's, an enthusiastic cookie that's willing to get her hands dirty with everything. And people love that. I think back then it was more of a novelty than it is now. Now, of course, you have a lot of young folks starting off early. Internships are very common. Um, so and I got really well taken care of. I think everyone in the room was always really nice to me. Yes, at times I did come across as that brash kid who thinks that they can do anything and can do things that people with a lot more experience than her can do. But I was fortunate to have very, very patient folks that I was working alongside. So yeah, I think I was treated as well as a 16-year-old should be.
You took over as a CEO in December 2019, just before the pandemic started, and then there was a lockdown.
Yeah.
Everyone was shaken by the pandemic that point of time, and all the events were cancelled. And I think OML was doing one of the most successful on-ground music event. So how did you deal with it at that point of time? More importantly, what were the thoughts that were going on in your mind, and how did you come up with the new ideas that you implemented? Because there were some really revolutionary ideas that you went along with the going live event. So if you can just walk us through the process, how did you kind of make that happen? And
Sure, sure. So I think the pandemic, more than anything else, was a human challenge more than a business challenge. And I think for us at OML, and very grateful to have the opportunity to go back to a board that was very welcoming of the idea that we didn't feel the need to let go of anyone, cut any salaries. We really had the opportunity to take care of our teams. And that's something that I'm very grateful to our board for. They saw that in a business like ours, we are predominantly a people led business. Our people are our software, hardware, and the software engineers themselves. If we show up, the work happens, and we got an opportunity to take care of our people, and that's something that very fortunate to have had that. But I think for us, really, why we lucked out is because we're a fairly diversified business. So our live events piece was only 15% of the overall business. Um, we had some good luck in the previous years where we had diversified fairly heavily into branded content as well as parts of the global business that you mentioned earlier. And while various countries were going through a series of starts and stops, there was some consistency with which business was maintained. One was that, and the other was the fact that a lot of our branded content was anyways reaching people in a digital form. And that's something that only picked up pace. The pandemic sort of accelerated a lot of trends that had already been sown previously, and one of them is digital entertainment. And for us, it really gave us an opportunity to strengthen our position in that space. So we pivoted with the folks that we had, the people in our teams that went through retraining. They got reskilled, they got deployed to newer opportunities, and yeah, we did the most that we could with the teams that we had last year. Of course, this year things are looking better, but I think it's too soon to say we're out of it just yet.
yeah,
Um, Right. But I think that said, the fact that we're a diversified business, it wasn't that hard on us as it was on others. For me, of course, taking on a role and then going into a pandemic, something that I think this world has probably dealt with only like 100 years ago. I don't think anybody had the playbook, so we literally wrote the playbook as we went along. But having a very supportive board as well as an amazing team, it really helped us navigate that. Also, some of the things that we've been thinking about is, and the analogy of the fact that like our teams are the hardware, software, and the software engineers themselves. That's something that we've been thinking a lot about even before the pandemic, because it's really when our teams show up in their creative best is when we're able to do our best work. And for that, the number one thing we can give our teams is headspace. So one of the things that we'd already done prior to the pandemic was pivot to a 4-day work week in office and 1 day work from home. So, anyways, for us, Wednesdays was work from home even before the pandemic. So when March hit, I don't think it was as hard on us again in terms of transitioning to a complete work from home mode. One was that. Then for us, for example, when obviously because of work from home, everybody started working crazy hours. One of the things that was really easy for us to do was, hey, okay, Wednesdays was always work from home, but now since everybody's working from home and you guys just need time to get your work done and not spend all that time on Zoom calls, it became no calls Wednesdays. We're like, okay, Wednesday is the one day you don't attend to a call, and we have clients, who value the relationship and value what we're doing for our teams to even adhere to that as well. So we moved to a complete like, hey, Wednesdays there are no calls. And that worked for a bit, and then obviously these are initiatives. You try them, and some work, some don't. So eventually we've settled on a 1 day off a month, and that's something we're still doing now, where our teams are taking a day off every month, just because it's one thing to say, hey, if you're at home, you should be working all times. But I think it's one thing to say this, you need that headspace. And for us in our industry, that's really important.
Yeah, so I think that's a very good initiative that you started with the No Call Wednesday. I think everyone should implement it. I hope people at SNU are also listening to this. Uh, so, you're in a creative space, Gunjan, and I'm sure there will be hundreds of ideas that come to your mind and to your table every day. Uh, how do you validate the feasibility of these ideas and figure out which one will work, which one will not work? Because when I went through your work and I was listening to, I was reading, listening to your interviews, what I realized is you're experimenting almost every day. I was like, okay, this is a true entrepreneur who's like, I mean, an entrepreneur is one who is experimenting every day. Yeah, she's experimenting every day. So how do you figure which idea will work and which are more feasible? Which one should you pick up? Which one, maybe not pick up? How do you figure that out? What's the process? I mean, do you have
So
any process or what is it that you follow?
I think there is more than a process. I think it comes from paying attention to a few things that we always look for. One is the idea placed in a trend that is growing, or has the trend sort of gone past peak? And that's something that's important, especially in the entertainment space. Um, the other is it backed by data? So one of the things that we've set up at OML is a very strong media and analytics practice. Um, the media and analytics practice literally helps us predict outcomes in terms of success for either the brands that we're working with or even the OTT platforms that we're partnering with. But that said, creativity at the end of the day, is inherently a human process, right? Like the data that we get can only sort of sharpen the brief. So it's really up to folks to come up with something new. Honestly, if you followed the data, then you'd be repeating everything that was successful of the past. You'd never try anything new. So I think we're always really looking to see what can potentially grow. While we don't have that crystal ball, the idea is to try as many things as we can, and things that we know have some sort of an immediate spike, those are the things then we double down on. But it's important to try those things. So, for example, a couple of years ago, we said that we wanted to look at gaming a lot more closely. And this is something that we do by just keeping eyes and ears open, understanding where the target audience is, what is taking up their attention, what are they spending their time on, and that's something that's grown considerably. Of like one of the things that I do is I pay attention to my niece and nephew and their habits, because for me that's the nature of things, or that's the direction in which things are going. My niece just turned 15 today, and her younger brother is 9. And they don't consume advertising. They're not watching TV. They have a YouTube subscription that's ad free, or else they're watching shows that their friends have recommended on an OTT platform, or then they're playing games with their friends online. My nephew, I remember, he asked me once, "Hey, Bua, why do you use a MacBook?" And I was like, "Because I'm in the media industry." It was a very nonchalant, like not really thought through answer. But I was looking for a lazy answer as well. I recognize that now. I was like, "Hey, I'm part of the media industry. I got to use a Mac." I didn't bother to sit down and like reason with him. And then he ended up seeing a show called The Great Indoors. It's a sitcom, and it's set inside a magazine publishing office. They publish a magazine called The Great Outdoors, but the irony is, because as a publishing house, they're running out of money. They don't have money to send their journalists on all those excursions and write about the various places in the wild. They actually sit in their office, Google, look for amazing images, and put that into the magazine and publish that. And in that office, everybody's using a Microsoft computer. And he was like, Bua, all of them work in a media business and they all have Microsoft computers. Why can't you use one? So that's why he's picking up cues. He's never seen a Microsoft ad. He's never seen an Apple ad. He doesn't know what I'm talking about. And he's just like, hey, that works for them. So surely it should work for you as well. What are you talking about? So I think it's really interesting to see how they pick up trends and they consume media and what they're paying attention to, and a lot of that really informs our you know experiments as well. But at the end of the day, it is all experimentation.
Yeah, so you have access to two generations. I was reading an article and it says the generation gap has reduced over time. Now it has become 8 years to 7 years. So I think that's quite helpful for you. So did it help you in figuring out the innovative things that you did when you launched your online music event from, and you picked it up offline and you launched it online and it was very well attended. And you had those party themes also there. So, would you like to talk a bit about it and how did you come up with those
Sure,
ideas?
sure. Again, I think it goes back to that simple principle of paying attention to where our audiences are at. For us, the Bacardi and 87 Weekender has always been a music festival that's brought together music fans. And just thinking about, okay, what is this community doing? The country's gone into lockdown, fans and artists are sort of discombobulated and isolating in their own homes. So, what does it mean to bring the community together? So, I remember March 13th was when our office decided it was now work from home time. March 27th, I think, no, March 24th was the national lockdown, and March 27th is when we did our first digital edition of the festival on Instagram, because back then Instagram lives were a thing. And then we repeated that again in April. And then by the time it was May, we thought maybe we'll be able to go back on ground this year. So we didn't do an Instagram session. We waited till like July, August, and we're like, okay, things are getting worse, they're not getting better. And then we realized that Instagram lives were also becoming really boring. Literally, every time you opened up Instagram, you'd see like 6 or 7 of those live sessions. You're like, okay, I'm not going to attend any of those. So I think at any given point of time, it's really interesting to pay attention to what people are comfortable with and what they're enjoying, and really be open to that. And that's when we realized that, hey, it doesn't make sense to do any more of those Instagram live sessions, but instead, if we created an online universe where fans could come together and everything else that happens at the festival can happen there, is when we partnered with Insider.in. We used their flagship platform and we put the festival up online. And of course, it took us a couple of months to do that as well. But it was great to have international artists participate as well. We had fans from around the world who listened in. There were various features that reminded people of the festival, because obviously at that point of time, when everybody's locked in at home, everybody's also very nostalgic of what it was like when you were out in the real world. No way does it compare to actually being on ground and like feeling that, that visceral feeling of being with like 10,000 fans. But it was as close as we could build it out to be. So you had an opportunities to flip between stages, which was our equivalent of walking from one stage to the other and listening to different sounds. There was a bit of crowd surfing, because crowd surfing or crowd watching is a big part of going to a music festival, because you want to see who else showed up. So there was a little feature which allows you to take a video of you enjoying the music festival from your house and uploading that, and the other people could do that as well. There was a section where you could just leave messages for people on the board. Then there was one more which to me was my favorite feature, where you could get into a room with your friends. So you have a small party code and you create a small party room. You get into that room, you can hear and talk to each other, you can see each other as well. So it's like this video call. But at the same time, the festival is sort of playing in the background, which is the equivalent of going to a music festival with friends. So we tried as much as we could, in terms of getting as far as we could with the technology that's available to us, but nothing really beats building that community. And I think all of tech only enables what humans desire at the end of the day. And I think that's really essential. So if it is about keeping the music community intact, or it is about, reaching out to that music community first, I think I would always say look at what the community wants and what's really going to make a difference in their lives, and then build from there. It's never just tech for tech's sake.
Absolutely true, Gunjan. Um, So you were working with chlorophyll and then you left chlorophyll to start your own company, Design of Information.
That's it.
What kind of, you know, what was the inspiration to start your own company? And were there any jitters in your stomach, it takes a lot of courage to start on your own and leave an established career, an established job. I mean, it's easier to start a venture when you're just starting, but leaving a established job and starting on your own must have been really I think it takes a lot of courage. But what was your thoughts, and um, what actually inspired you to do so?
Thanks, Shalu. I think, okay, looking back, of course, I think now I can comfortably say maybe I was just being brash and young and a little more hopeful and naive. But I'm glad I made that move. The thought process really was that when brands approach communication agencies, and whether it's a media agency or a PR agency or an advertising agency or a social media agency, brands never really have the opportunity to solve the real business challenges that they're looking at. So, for example, if you're a mall and you go to a PR agency and say, "Hey, my biggest problem is that I don't have the kind of footfall I need to make the rents that I want." The PR agency's response to that would be, "Hey, let me get XYZ publication to write about you, and that should lead to footfall." If you go to, say, an outdoor or a billboard company, like, "Oh, because nobody knows where you are, let me put up a bunch of billboards with arrows pointing to you." If you go to a social media agency, they'll be like, "Oh, because you have no Instagram following, that's why you don't have footfalls, let me work on that." But no one's really thinking about the business's challenge as the business itself. And sometimes it's communications, but sometimes it's also just a design solution, which might mean, "Hey, let's pick up the food court and put it on the ground floor, and let's take the grocery shop and put it up on the top floor. Let's flip it around and see where it goes." And that's really what was super exciting for me. I come from a business family. I've studied business. I've studied new media theory and anthropology and a bunch of other things that I got an opportunity to do when I was younger. And I feel like the solutions are never straightforward. And I was very excited to be able to do all of those things. Obviously, starting out as an entrepreneur also meant that I needed to staff the teams in a way that we could fulfill these business challenges for brands. I was lucky to have the opportunity to work with some really amazing colleagues. And also some of the brands that took bets with us. So I remember we ran a bunch of research for brands like Samsonite and American Tourister, where they trusted us with some of the CEOs that buy their bags, saying, "Hey, if you're a CEO, you would be seen with the Samsonite today. I trust Gunjan to be in the room with you and ask you the right questions." And I remember we went in with, so they had commissioned the same study previously, and they got back a slide deck of some 300 slides. And I remember going into that room and saying, "Hey, that's a waste of your time. Let me come back to you with 6 slides and I'll give you the answers." So I think just being able to level with other business owners in a one-to-one capacity is something that was very exciting for me. And to be able to bring back to them a communication solution which would help them solve whatever business challenge lay ahead was something that I was really excited about.
Great. So, does that starting on your own, does that still help you when you are running an organization which is so successful?
I don't think that will ever be taken away from anyone. I think we're all entrepreneurs in our own right. Whenever we decide to do something a little differently, look at a problem solution in a way that's not been done before, or when we try to attempt something that may not be the normal part of, of course, for things within an organization, I think we're all being entrepreneurs. And that's literally what it takes. I think it takes an opportunity and then going after it with diligence. That's all it takes.
Gunjan, it's one thing to be motivated yourself, and it's another thing to motivate others to work, right? And so, this transition which has happened in the last 2 years, where we all had literally a crash course on uncertainty. Um, how did you motivate the artists? What I have heard about the artists is it's very difficult to, make them change. How did you motivate them? How did you convince them to change their formats? And everyone has moved, and also people within your own organization. How did you coordinate with them? How did you motivate them?
Well, at least for folks within the organization, I hope that they feel like they were well taken care of. I think we did as much of the creature comforts as we could. But that said, I think the number one thing is that people come first. And that's something that we've all learned the hard way last year. And when it comes to the artists themselves, I think they literally led the way for us. They showed us what's possible, as opposed to us going back to them with suggestions. Of course, there's only so much that data can tell you, but artists know their fans better than anybody else. They know what their fans want. They know how their fans are feeling. They know what their fans are going to respond to. And honestly, we followed their lead more than anything else. So we've really turned to them saying, hey, if this is where we're at, where do you think this can go? And more often than not, artists will have the answer for you.
Okay, so it was artists leading you rather than the other way around,
Absolutely.
and I
Always,
was.
always. And I think we've always taken their lead as a business. As OML, we first started out as an artist management company. And back then, we used to manage musicians. Our pitch to musicians was, "Hey, don't sign up with a record label company. It's more profitable for you to be an independent musician, own the rights to your own music, because anyways, record label companies were famous for giving away." They're giving you a cent on every dollar that they spent, every dollar that they earned from CD sales. So artists were traditionally poor, and record label companies were always making a lot of money. So our pitch to them was, hey, give your music away for free on the internet. And if your fans discover you and love you, they'll come out and watch your shows live, and they'll pay good ticket money for it. And it's better for you to keep the rights to your music. And luckily for us, honestly, that bet paid off. The internet became what it is. YouTube is the biggest music engine in the world. So we started there. We started in artist management. Today, of course, that business spans comedians, writers, directors, magicians, like digital celebrities, Instagrammers, YouTube bloggers, etc. Then the next division that we actually set up was because these musicians back then needed to make music videos to put up on YouTube. So the next team that we set up was the content production team. Of course, today that content production team works with the likes of Amazon Prime Video, Netflix, Disney Plus, Hotstar, where we're producing OTT content series. And that's happening at scale. The third business that we set up was the live events team, where we realized that these musicians now need to go out and perform. So that was the team that today, of course, builds, the massive music festivals, comedy festivals, etc. Then we started Insider at OML, which was a ticketing business. And again, the goal with the ticketing business was to say, hey, if artists can have the power of data, which is telling them who's actually buying their tickets to their shows, they'll know how to market better. And those options weren't available to us back then. So we actually set up Insider as a way to put that, like the power of that data, back into the hands of the artist. Today, of course, Insider is a part of Paytm. And then the fifth business we set up was the branded solutions business, which again was going to brands and saying, hey, don't waste your money on Google and Facebook, because you know that most of those views are coming from bots. They're not real views. Give your money to artists, because artists have real fans, and you will get a chance to communicate with real audiences. So we've always built our businesses around audiences, and honestly, the pandemic was no different. We literally followed their lead.
So, Gunjan, you mentioned OTT content, and you also mentioned YouTube. And that reminds me, YouTube, started off as an entertainment content provider, but now what we see is a lot of educational content and a lot of information content on YouTube, and that's taking on in the big way. Do you see this line between education and entertainment industry blurring away, and how do you envisage this trend taking off?
I think the big change is the difference between push and pull content. I think every all businesses will sooner or later, or can actually already be qualified as a content business. What you and I are doing right now is producing content. Um, we're having this conversation. It's going to be seen somewhere. It's going to be, accessed later from a library. It's no different from the library that Netflix has, right? Um, I think that over time, the only thing that will win is content that people want to watch, which is pretty much the end of broadcast medium. It's all about 1:1. Literally, all of us are serving audiences of one. Each one person has to want to watch this and therefore will log in. It's all about them making those choices. You can't hold people hostage in front of a TV screen anymore and say, now this is all you're going to watch. And when I tell you it's time for advertising, you're going to go to an ad break. I think that sort of as a time is completely past. Um, so I think that's the real difference. It's all pull content now, and that is not what happened first to entertainment will now happen to both education as well as information.
Yeah, so you're right. There was time when there was this broadcasting when people used to wait for 8 o'clock to happen or 9 o'clock to happen on a particular Saturday or a weekday, and then watch that particular episode of their favorite series. But now I think that has gone away, and that's also affected the advertising, like you said, and. And I think now it's creating a way toward the branded content, like you mentioned. So, what I read was OML is big time into branded content. And how do you think that will change the advertising agencies in terms of whether we're going to have more responsible advertising? Um, or there will be more influence of the people will influence more, the youngsters will be influenced more by the branded content, and how will it change the content creation also?
So I think when it comes to branded content changing advertising, I think that's already happened to a large degree. There are some gateways to entertainment that if you want to cross, you will have to go via a sponsored ad. So it's literally like the first 5 seconds on a YouTube video, right? You have the skip ad button, and mostly people are just focusing on that and trying to hypnotize that button into working faster, but
Right.
it never does. But it's it's those that keep that gateway, right? And if you want to be able to access the content that lies behind that, then you have to go via the sponsored route, which is watch that 5 second ad clip and then move on. But that is going to become more and more inconspicuous, and that's already happening. Like for example, the show The Great Indoors that I referenced earlier. That's where it's working, and it's working at that level. When it comes to influence and responsible advertising, I think there's a lot that needs to be done in that space. It's going to become harder and harder to control. I think we've all been hearing about things that are happening in the metaverse, and I think the latest that I read today is folks are trying to sell insurance in the metaverse already. So
Yeah,
if there's
I
anything
was
to be
about to.
believed, like financial services has already reached there. But yes, there is a lot of scope for setting the guardrails around which these things operate.
You mentioned the OTT content, and OML is also into OTT content, producing content for Netflix and Amazon Prime. And with the pandemic arriving, the number of subscriptions for Netflix and Amazon Prime increased significantly. Uh, so suddenly, the Indian content was competing with the global content. So do you think there has been a change in the content creation in the last 2 years because of the pandemic, and how this content creation has changed, and whether this trend will continue or it's going to change again? How do you see that happening?
So I think what you mentioned earlier about the fact that yes, the pandemic has changed our content consumption habits. I think it's a beast that will that constantly needs feeding in terms of, folks just waiting to watch something. But a lot of the stuff that came out during the last year was work that was already in motion previously. Any long form show typically takes 6 to 8 months to get made, um, and 6 to 8 months prior to be greenlit. So you're anyways looking at a year. So a lot of the things that are coming out now were probably greenlit in 2020 or 2021. Um, Sorry, 2019 or 2020. So I I don't think we have yet seen all the effects of what the lockdown has done to content production. I think it's still happening. There was yet another late night show, I think, last week in the US that hosted without a live audience after a whole year. I think these things, there will be a series of starts and stops. Um, but when it comes to Indian content competing with global audience, with global content, I think that had already started happening. Again, it's one of those trends that the pandemic has just accelerated. And the reason why this started happening even earlier was because of the really large Indian diaspora that's outside the country. So a lot of Indian content was getting consumed outside. But I think now, because of everything else that's available online and the choices that you and I have to make up from a far wider set, we're becoming a lot more discerning in terms of what we want to watch. And this goes back to my point of you and I being audiences of one. There are no mass audiences anymore. You're deciding for yourself, I'm deciding for myself. You may like a Danish show about this woman who becomes a prime minister, um, purely because of the way the cards fell the night of the elections. It's called Borgen. It's a lovely show. It's on Netflix. Because that might appeal to you. But for someone like me, I might find that in a completely different way and a roundabout way, and I might only discover that 4 years later after you've already seen it. But that's because it just showed up on my timeline. So I think the fact that you and I consume the same media might even happen at different points of time. So each one of us is constructing our own media experiences, and no two media experiences will be the same anymore.
No, that's absolutely true, Gunjan, what you've mentioned. Now, even if there are five people in a family, all five of them are watching content separately
Yeah.
on their own laptops. And, even if I have to watch the same show as the other one, because we are free during different time zones. So we watch
Absolutely.
during different time zones on our own laptops, and it's not, that TV is somehow it's just there as a showpiece, and people are watching more
Yeah.
content on their own personal space. Um, so do you think more content will be, like you said, one to one? But we hardly see a lot of content for the kids coming up. It's more directed towards the younger adults and adults, as I would say. But for the kids, there is no specific content that comes up. So why is that? The kids are left out in these OTT platforms.
You've really hit the nail on the head. I think it's something that platforms are opening up to as well. So Netflix, for example, has a kids section. Disney Plus Hotstar has Disney, but they're also looking at building a very strong children's library. Children are becoming a lot more discerning as well. I think YouTube Kids already does exceptionally well for them. I think going back to what we were talking about earlier, um, it's also that you and I don't see this as much because we're not kids. If we turned our profile to being a 12-year-old or an 8-year-old online, we would be bombarded with a lot more media choices for children. But this absolutely goes back to what you're saying. We, as a family, we don't have shared media experiences anymore, and that's something that I've been thinking about, and obviously concerns me given my niece and nephew. But when we were growing up, for example, I'd see like Dad's old cassettes and his old LPs, and I'd be like, "Oh wow, this is the kind of music that Dad used to listen to." Or there'd be a newspaper that came into the house, so all of us were sort of discussing the same news. So because of the physical nature of media in the past, there would be a shared experience. I would, at some point of time, I'd pop in a music cassette that my dad listened to, and be like, "Oh wow, what is this old music? It's great." Like there would be a lot more discovery. But that doesn't happen anymore because my niece, for example, who's 15, because she likes Taylor Swift, will get recommended other songs that other fans of Taylor Swift will like. And that's the rabbit hole that she's going down. Similarly for me, where they'd be like, hey, you're in your late 30s, and therefore these are the kind of songs that other people in their late 30s are listening to, and therefore this is, because you probably graduated from school this in like X year, and that is the year when these songs were popular. So these are the songs we're going to keep throwing at you because your music tastes probably haven't matured. Because that happens to most of us, right? Like we still like the songs that we went to college with. So I think discovery is a big challenge, or rather, I feel like what we discover is is almost being directed by what else is happening on platform algorithms. And I really hope that that's something that we're able to find a way to break out of.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is no shared family time, which is there. Even if I like a show, I just tell it to my son, okay, that was a great show. Why don't you also watch it whenever you get time?
Yeah.
So that's how the conversations are happening nowadays. Gunjan, we're running out of time. I had a lot of other questions, but two questions that I really wanted to ask was, one is about the glass ceiling. Was there any glass ceiling that you hit or that you faced, in your journey? And how did you, overcome that?
Okay. Um, I okay. I'm going to speak very personally for myself. I don't think that my experiences are representative of what other women have had to go through. Um, for me, the glass ceiling has not been a very overt one. It has been one that has been, very disguised, very, and not very obvious in a lot of places. But that said, it hasn't been a very strong force that has helped me back. I think I've been very lucky to have the opportunities that I have. And I'm very conscious of the fact that I've had those opportunities. I've had a very, very supportive family. And I remember, like, for example, when I wanted to go to NID to study in Ahmedabad, my granddad at that time was like, hey, why do you want to go to Ahmedabad? And my response to that was because it's the best design school in the country. And his response to that was, if you want to study design and you don't think Bombay is good enough for you, please look at going to a bigger city. Don't go to a smaller city. Because he was very clear that, and also it came from his experiences, right? Like he had spent so much of his life moving us from a small town to a big city that he said all your future opportunities are only going to happen to you in bigger cities. So he actually pushed me to look at opportunities in the US. That is not something that I'm very conscious of, the fact that I'm sure that's not something that a lot of girls get. So I've really been very lucky. And yeah, I'm sorry, I can't speak for everyone there.
So you lucked out. I was reading Miss Indra Nui's book, and she said that women can't have it all. Do you resonate with that statement?
Absolutely, I do. And I think that's not just true of women. I think that's true of men as well. It's just that men make different choices. And over time, what men have has become glorified. And there are the GQs and the ET Panachas of the world that will tell you, hey, that's what it means to have a man that has it all. Nobody has it all. Nobody has it all figured out. I just think it's you decide for yourself what your subset of priorities are, and you work on that. Every relationship, whether it's work, whether it's personal, takes time, takes effort. Yes, women end up doing a lot of the weightlifting when it comes to responsibilities at home, but I'm very hopeful that that will change.
Me too. So, Gunjan, we have a lot of questions that are there from the audiences. I'll pick up the ones that have come in that order that they have come.
Sure.
So there's Jagdeshwari Mishra. So that person is asking, how is the rise of data-led marketing influence creativity and your business?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I alluded to that a little bit before, where while we have this really strong media and analytics team, I think what that data does, it just sharpens the tool. So we can tell creators, hey, this is what's going to work for you. This is what fans are looking at across platforms. This is, your fans are also fans of XYZ creators. Maybe you want to collaborate with them. Maybe this is, an opportunity to do a bigger media splash. But at the end of the day, they have to do that. They have to deliver that creative effort. So like I said, at the end of the day, it's human effort. And yeah, I think it's for them to know that while the brief gets sharper and the data can only tell you more things, it's for you as a creator to say, I'm going to drown out all of that and I'm going to pick the few trends that make sense to me and the few directions that make sense to me, and then make the most of that.
Very true. I mean, data can only, it's a measure. So you have to pick up which
Correct.
one do you want to pick up and which one you want to leave.
Absolutely. And I think there's so much misunderstanding that's possible with data because it's so dry. Like I remember my father using this example once. He said, half the world is women, half the world is men. So, and statistics will tell you that 50% of the world has breasts. That doesn't mean that everyone in the world has one breast. Like that is not how you understand data. Data can tell you everything you want it to. You just have
Sure.
you have to put in the effort to understand what it's trying to do.
No, and also, how do you measure a particular content? How do you measure a particular variable? And how do you apply it? That is something which is very, very useful and not just totally be driven by data. And I completely agree to what you have said. There is another question by Rajiv. It's as traditional advertising is shifting to content and communication, how do you see branded content evolving?
I think brands have no choice but to evolve. If folks are paying more attention to content, at the end of the day, as a brand and as a marketing manager of a brand, your job is to get as much reach as possible for as little money as possible. The only way to do that is to be part of the biggest media moments in your target audience's life. If your target audience is spending all of its attention or is looking to say Netflix for its entertainment or is spending all of its time on YouTube, then you don't have an option but to be there. And if you are there, you might as well be part of the biggest moments that happen there. So, for example, if you have an opportunity to partner with the Netflix, it makes sense for you to be part of some of their shows. Or if you're on YouTube, then it makes sense to be part of some of the biggest creators that are putting out content on YouTube. That is literally the only way to reach credible audiences. So brands unfortunately don't have an opportunity to be selective here. Perforce, you have to follow, the way the trends are flowing, and you have to follow your audience where they're going.
So, Gunjan, there has also been a rise in influencer marketing where a YouTuber or people who have a lot of following kind of endorse a brand and talk about it. That's not a question that's from the audience, but I just came to my mind. Do you
Sure.
think it's going to, so what's the ethical, is it ethical and it's going to, it influences a lot of people, especially the youngsters, how ethical it is and how do these influencers kind of figure that out, which product to endorse and which product not to endorse? And
Sure. So I think the unique power that influencers or creators have today is that one, they are media channels themselves, so they have as much responsibility as say a Times of India would. Uh, Second is that they are creative directors because they are creating that piece of content. So they're the ones sort of putting their heads together in terms of, hey, how do I want to communicate this? So which is where they have as much responsibility as a creative or a advertising agency would. And the third is that they're also the face of your brand. So they have as much responsibility as an Amitabh Bachchan would. Now, combine the three and then think about, hey, how much responsibility should or should they not have? We never question a Times of India for printing an ad for a fairness cream. We never question Amitabh Bachchan for promoting, you know, brands that carry um, unnatural flavoring or sweeteners, etc. We never punish a creative agency that's come up with an ad for an insurance company that is only making a lot more fee on mis-selling, right? So I think influencer marketing has just sort of gotten a bad rap because people see them having wielding a lot more power than they think young kids should. That said, I do believe that if you have a fan base and an audience, it is important to be responsible to them. And I think one of the things that we always caution our creators and artists around is if you genuinely believe in something and you think that there's no harm in someone trying something using a product, if you wouldn't mind using it yourself, then feel free to endorse it.
So, can there be any checks and balances that can be brought in? Because, if let's say Amitabh Bachchan or Times of India, when they advertise or when they endorse a brand, they are very conscious of the fact that there is a wider audience that they're reaching out to. But these influencers have a very, the audience might not be very wide. So, can we have some checks and balances that can be brought in to keep them in check?
Absolutely. And I think that standard guardrail should apply across the board. Whether you're reaching
So,
out to a wider audience or a smaller audience, you're still reaching out to an audience and you're still doing the act of communication. So I think whatever those guardrails are should be implemented across the board. And that's exactly what we were talking about earlier, where I mentioned that there is a lot of scope for this to be formalized.
okay. Uh, there's another question from the audience, and we're running out of time. If you had superpower,
Sure.
this is a very interesting question, Gunjan. If you had a superpower to change or tweak any algorithm overnight for all platforms, what would that be?
Oh, wow, that's such a great question. Okay, this is the one. I think if you hide behind the anonymity of digital to get away with saying something to somebody that you wouldn't be able to tell them face to face, then I think the platform should expose who you are. I don't think you should be allowed to be anonymous anymore if you wish to troll or abuse anybody online.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I completely agree with you. So, one last question from the audience. How do you see the digital landscape evolve in 2022, and where do you see the opportunities? So, Vinny Mathur has asked this question.
I think the digital landscape is evolving to a place where um, communities are getting built on digital. What's happened in the last 2 years is that friends have found each other online, and folks that did not have the normal means to become friends. So, all of us, like folks who, today you're friends with folks who you went to school with, or you went to college with, or then you worked alongside in offices. Um, these were friends you made because you were in the same life stage as them. I don't think that's true anymore. When we're all isolating at home, you're meeting people online, different people are at different life stages. Um, but if you happen to have a shared media habit with those people, there's an opportunity to make friends around that. And I think that's how communities are getting built online. And I think that is going to be very powerful in the times to come.
Correct. I mean, that's something, that's where we are headed to. Yeah, so the offline communities are something, which are fading away, maybe. There is another question
Well, I hope
that's
not. I hope that the online communities eventually transform into offline communities. I don't think this is a very healthy place for us to be, that it only remains online.
yeah, I mean, it has to translate into offline. Otherwise, we'll be all stuck in our own holes and in our own rooms.
But metaverse is here, so
Yeah, you never know where we are headed to. So, Gunjan, there is another question, but that's more probably towards the SNU side. It's about, so the question is, do you have any program in your organizations? Uh, okay, that's for you also, and to help students who want to start a new venture. So this was the first question to be posted, but I picked it up later, so because I thought it'll.
No, absolutely. So yes, we do actually. In fact, apart from a standard internship program, we actually have an office. Uh, we call it an office. It's actually just a team that works on strategic initiatives that a bunch of us CXOs put our heads together on and spend some time thinking about what new business initiatives can be. And we're very happy to back young entrepreneurs that are maybe already thinking like 10 steps ahead of us, and we're very happy to, I mean, we'd be privileged if they'd have us as part of the ride. So yeah, very happy to listen to new ideas. Like I said, for me, I have easy access to my niece and nephew, but I think we've reached a place where it's important to have mentors who are younger than you as opposed to older than you. So yeah, definitely open to hearing from anybody here who would like to reach out.
So we have a course where, which is an entrepreneurial course, an experiential course, where the students formulate their ideas into a business plan and then they get to execute it. And we're always looking for mentors and founders to come and address them. So I'll get in touch with you regarding that as well.
Definitely. Would love to
It's
help in any way I can.
uh, Gunjan, it was a really interesting session. And coming, you've been a woman who has broken all the barriers and done so much. So, if you have to recommend three lessons to the younger generation, I'm sure you are young, still young, but to students or to younger generation, what would that be? To follow their own path, that is.
Sure, sure. I think one actually caught me off guard yesterday in a presentation that the newest team members in our office made. It was part of a year-end program that we have at OML. It's called the Omelette Awards,
Okay,
and
that's interesting.
it's just a way for all of us to get together and sort of like celebrate how the year has been. And the folks that are the newest to join come together and usually put something together. It's also a nice way for us to get to know who the newest team members are. Otherwise, it's easy to get sort of lost in the crowd. And one of them stood up and said something about Gen Z that really stuck with me. She said that we're too smart to do nothing, and we're too lazy to do everything, and that really broke my heart. I was so sad to see that because I really feel that this generation has the opportunity to do anything that it puts its heart behind. Capital has never been cheaper. It's really easy to raise money. You have all the tech in the world. Data is so cheap in India. You have access to all the information in the world. Um, you're at a place where we are probably going to be at the most educated best. If you look at India today, we have the highest levels of education that India is probably ever going to have. You have this workforce that's waiting to be used. And then when I see a statement like that, I'm just like, please don't give it up. Please don't, because I think the one true opportunity we have is to work hard. I don't think that's something that if that anyone can take away from you, and I would really recommend it. That's the one thing that I can say I don't have any regrets about. Even when I was in college, I was studying in the US. I did a double major. I was part of the honors program, which meant that my grades could not slip below a B in any course, or else I'd lose my 50% scholarship. And I was doing three jobs at the same time to put myself through college. Um, I don't regret working hard at all. I'm so happy I did that. And I know it's really easy to be jaded about a world that you never know whether it's coming to an end. I think, Shalu, you called it a lesson in certain uncertainty. I know that the last 2 years have been really difficult, but I don't think your hard work is something anybody can take away from you. So I think if it's one thing I'd say, please don't give up on that. That's the one thing you have. The one thing you can control is how much effort you decide to put into something. So yeah, I don't have three, but I have one, and this is it.
I think that sums up everything. Thank you, Gunjan. Thank you for such an interesting session and giving us time and for giving us so many insights.
Thank you so much for having me here. Sorry we started a little late. IT issues as always, but yeah. I mean, a year into the pandemic, we still haven't figured out tech, so I don't
There
know
are so
where
many
we're going
things
to.
that need to be figured out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we